let's begin.
Woohoo! Thanks for being here!
Hello everyone, and welcome to MENA Voices in the Arts. MENA being Middle Eastern North African. First of all, how many here were at the panel that we did the first time at LA Comic-Con back in December? All right. So for those who came back, thank you for coming back. For those who are new, welcome. This is a panel where we discuss and highlight Middle Eastern North African or MENA representation in the arts and media and all forms of entertainment. Not just, on screen, but also, behind the camera. We discuss filmmakers, actors, writers, artists, people working in animation, music, comedy, all different art forms here, and this is what we're here to do today. For those who don't know, my name is Paul Zachariah. My pronouns are he, him. I'm an actor, writer, and filmmaker based here in LA. I've worked on many different projects over the years. I've been in productions for 48-Hour Film Project and BuzzFeed. I have a recurring role on the web show Mr. Student Body President, and I'm currently creating some of my own projects at the moment. I am representing Iraq, Egypt, and Palestine. And if you're wondering why the gray hair, it's because I've been cosplaying as Doctor Strange today. We've got a great group of panelists here to speak today about all their highlights and accomplishments in MENA. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with.
Hi, I'm Kristina Giblin. I currently work at Marvel, and I'm known on previous projects working on American Dad, Mike Tyson Mysteries, Looney Tunes, Final Space, and what else did I work on? There was a lot. I am an animator, but I mostly work in animation as a painter, and so I really love what I do. And the fact that I have the opportunity to do what I love is very far and few between, and I had to make my family mad at me for it. So sometimes that just happens, but it's great to be here. And I'm representing, my pronouns are she, her, they, and I'm representing Indigenous Coptic Egypt.
Jesus, it's like I've never touched the microphone. Hi, I'm Yas Modares Ghasiri. His pronouns are he, him. I am an actor and writer. I've been some stuff as an actor. I was actually played a trans veteran in the feature film MVP, starring Matt Boyer, who's an NFL star, produced by Sylvester Stallone, and I was also in Baby Splitters with Danny Putty. I'm also a writer as well, so I'm working on several projects right now, a feature film, a pilot, and actually I started writing a musical with a friend as well. Most of my content that I create is centered on trans visibility, especially for trans masculine folks, because there's not enough representation. And I make everything a little bit Middle Eastern if I can. I'm representing Iran, and so I bring a lot of my Persian heritage, even into the book I'm working on right now. My goal is I just don't want another trans kid to feel the way I did growing up because of how isolating that was, and that can be expanded into being Middle Eastern, because besides Aladdin, there wasn't a lot growing up. So, happy to be here today. Thank you everyone for coming.
Hello, I'm Esraa Darwish. I'm an assistant director. I've worked for every major studio in Hollywood. Right now I'm currently working for Blumhouse and Atomic Monster on one of their new features. I'm a storyteller. I think stories saved me growing up as a kid. I think they're the greatest asset we have to tell people who we are, and getting into the film industry was important for me so that I could step in and be like, I'm in the room. You can't tell stories about me anymore. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sarah Fatemi. My pronouns are that bitch. I'm kidding, they're she, her. I'm a stand-up comedian, actress, writer, and producer in post-production. I have performed all over LA. I was just in Austin. I performed at the Comedy Store, Laugh Factory, Improv, done Roast Battle, that kind of thing. I'm representing Iran. And I also was the producer, writer, and lead of the award-nominated web series Saffron and Rose. And yeah, I also have a lot of my own projects that I I specifically try to work for Middle Eastern female representation in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for the introduction. So yeah, like I said, I wanted to create like kind of this panel, this gathering here to, talk about our own different experiences from all of our different backgrounds and everything. And because I know for me, when it comes to the term representation matters, which I fully believe in 100%, I've always felt like the MENA communities have been left out of that conversation and not talked about enough and not highlighted enough in the same way that many other underrepresented groups are. And I've been noticing some progress over the years compared to the little progress growing up. I know for me, a lot of my earliest influences for wanting to get into acting and filmmaking and everything, I remember being influenced by my idol, Mr. Steven Spielberg and Walt Disney, watching all these different films growing up and wanting to get into that, but very rarely did I ever see someone who looked like me on screen, unless it was like Aladdin. Aladdin's gonna come up a lot on this channel, I think. It did in the last one, so it's gonna come up here too.
Yeah,
but
disclosure.
yeah. But those were some of my biggest influences, and for me, representing, MENA people kind of came later on in my life, in my writing career, my filmmaking career, and it's something, I've been trying to work on as well and think about when I'm writing my stories, when I'm creating my stories, and also thinking about like who I want to work with, and also the kind of people I'm working with now. I haven't even seen a lot of people who look like me behind the scenes and on screen. But for me, I just know that a lot of what I've been writing now has been loosely based on my own life, even with, a lot of my family's influenced my own writing, and a lot of friends and everything. And that's something that I've been trying to work on. So my question to you guys is, like, what were some of your biggest influences to get into what you currently do right now? Like, what and when sparked your interest? And did your family or culture have any kind of influence on that?
Okay. Maybe I'll start. So, as I mentioned in the last panel, if you were here, I definitely mentioned The Little Mermaid, because I wanted to be part of that world. And I knew that there was more to that character on the screen than just drawings and paintings. Like, there really felt like there was just this beautiful longing emotion behind her, and I wanted to try and capture that somehow. Because I knew, even when I was really young, I didn't want to be an actress, but I knew that I wanted to try and invoke emotion in some way. And it felt like animation was the best route to do that, because it involved so many things that I love, which was like drawing, painting, acting, and like you could do anything with animation if you dreamed about it. So, and it's a medium, it's not a genre. So, as the great Guillermo del Toro has been saying lately. So, that inspired me from a very young age. I know my father always had a bit of an artistic streak. The way he got so giddy when he got to draw something, especially if it was something silly, was always just like very memorable and tender to me, and that's, it was really special. And so I remember seeing that, and my mom telling me how she would weave things growing up, and so they definitely supported the arts. And I'm grateful that I had that going for me. There were certain times where it didn't always feel like it was feasible to make a living being an artist. It's a very competitive industry in animation especially. It's very insular and very small. So I'm grateful that I was able to do that, and continually I'm inspired by people like Guillermo del Toro, who are also immigrants, who are creating the things that they love, and finally it seems like there's an audience growing for the type of movies and the stuff that he's making, and I can only hope for more of that with people like me, who can tell things from maybe a slightly different perspective, and experiences that I went through, and I think that's really special and meaningful.
I feel like the way I've described like my gender and masculinity is Bruce Lee, Indiana Jones, and Humphrey Bogart. So I think for me, those were really big influences for me growing up, which was like an interesting, like, and confusing journey being trans of like who I identified with versus seeing myself on screen, let alone learning in like culture and representation. Which is why, you know, things like Aladdin or Beauty and the Beast, I really identified with the Beast. I think being trapped in the wrong body as a child growing up had this big impact on me. But I think, honestly, just being like this ADHD child who just like couldn't sit through anything, I just wanted to act out immediately. Like when I saw it, I like couldn't get through it. I wanted to be in the backyard being Bruce Lee, thinking there was like going to be bad guys behind the wall or acting things out and living in that world. And so I think the way, you know, Esraa said, just being a storyteller is just really like a way I identify. And so just being in the magic and, okay, this is actually funny that this is like a recovered thing coming to me. The example I was going to use, because, you know, like, yeah, like being in the theater as a kid and seeing a movie like The Mummy. Lots of interesting representation or lack of happening in that movie. But just seeing that kind of level of adventure movie was just so exciting and so fun. So yeah, I just think something like that, just wanted to be a part of it, and then realizing I didn't fit in anywhere in the industry, which is why I needed to write and make my own content, and which I have, and which has been really rewarding and fulfilling because it's also allowed opportunities for other people who feel like they don't fit into the entertainment industry as well.
I still have beef with The Mummy. I need to understand why only the Egyptians died. I'm Egyptian, I failed to tell you that in the introduction. But, what's that?
The Americans died too?
Yeah, I'm Egyptian. I still have beef. That doesn't make it any better. For me, growing up as a kid, it was like the film that made me want to work in film was definitely Edward Scissorhands, can't you tell? And part of that was just like, this guy didn't fit anywhere. Everything was misunderstood, really spoke to me because I was like 11 after 9/11, and that, I mean, I think for a lot of us here, changed the trajectory of our lives. But beyond that, my family, especially during Ramadan, and Ramadan Kareem to anybody celebrating right now, but during Ramadan, like we would sit around and watch the Egyptian dramas together. Like Egypt has this massive film industry, and that's where I learned how to be Egyptian. Like I grew up in New Hampshire, where I was the only brown kid. And so that was my lifeline. And so I had to find a way to work in film and television. Like it was kind of a no-brainer for me since I was 8 years old. And then, yeah, and then growing up, seeing that there was a lack of representation for us, and it's sort of lies or misunderstood characters that you see, or that you've seen from the MENA area in film and television that sort of, I mean, it pisses you off a little bit. And you're like, all right, like, they don't, like people writing these stories or making these stories, they don't have anyone in the room who is from the MENA area. That's the first problem. The second problem is there are few people holding them accountable, and they don't see sort of the destruction that comes from that. And having lived with the name calling and all sorts of stuff, it's like, okay, I got to work my way in there. And even if, being assistant director isn't, I'm not in the writer's room, but I am on the set. And when things don't look right, I can be like, that's not gonna fly. That's not gonna look good. But yeah.
Too much sand.
Too much yellow filter.
This is gonna sound really ADHD, so my bad. But for me, first and foremost, what inspired me to be a performer was I was obsessed with Shirley Temple movies growing up. And maybe I know she's white, but it's probably the curly hair. I grew up in Ohio, and so I really wasn't aware of my identity except when my family would celebrate Persian holidays. That really didn't come to me until I went to college because, #woke, no. And the first time I saw a stand-up comedian which inspired me to do that was actually when I was visiting my family in Iran, and my dad would put up this projection screen, and there's this comedian. He was the only comedian in the country at the time. His name was Hamid Mahi Safat, and he was just so funny, but yet he's a man, and I never even though I enjoyed it, I never saw that as a possibility, because to me, stand-up was a guy's thing. I'd never seen the first time I saw a female stand-up comic was the first time I stepped foot in the Comedy Store 7 years ago when I moved to LA. And then as far as like really getting into the comedy route, one of my favorite shows growing up was Family Guy. And kind of like Kristina said, mediums, animation, if you can dream it, you can do it. And it was just so funny. It's the kind of show my family would sit around and watch every Sunday evening. And as dirty as the jokes were, my parents got it. So I was kind of like, I wonder what it'd be like to work with Seth MacFarlane. And yeah, so that comedy really is a way that I deal with trauma and deal with like things that I'm afraid of. And so that's definitely a route that I'd like to see more Middle Eastern female representation.
Very good, very good. By the way, when we're talking about the moment, we're talking about the Tom Cruise one or the Brendan Fraser one.
Oh, Brendan Fraser.
I know. Well, yeah, so...
It's not that we don't love Brendan Fraser. We love him.
But we appreciate that The Mummy was many people's bisexual awakening.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's like, Jonathan is the whitest man on the face of the planet. And he's half Egyptian, if anyone forgot.
It's funny because that's the movie that I was literally most scared of growing up. Like it would give me nightmares. And that's how I would deal with like my fear. Like I make jokes about mummies, but yeah, I still haven't seen the movie. I'm too scared.
Can we talk about Prince of Persia? We finally had one. Finally.
Oh, Jake Gyllenhaal.
Finally, and then yeah, thank God for Ben Kingsley.
Well, what's great though is that, right now there's this kind of, it's slowly starting to happen where we're getting more MENA people, MENA Americans creating stuff and writing stuff, and it's becoming more part of American culture and pop culture. So some of the biggest recent examples of the last few years is the show Rami on Hulu. I don't know if you guys have watched it. It just had its 3rd season. It's written and created by Canadian Rami Youssef, starring an Egyptian American. And we also have another one called Mo on Netflix, which has just been renewed for its 2nd and final season, starring and created by Mohammed Amr. Also another big one I would say is Rami Malek, who was on Mr. Robot, Bohemian Rhapsody, and he won the Oscar for that film. And I would even say to some extent, even the live-action Aladdin remake that came out a few years ago, I mean, they made a point for like a long time to try to find the right cast for that film, whether you like it or not. It's like, whether you like the film or not, they still worked on having a mostly MENA cast, except for Will Smith.
Can I add as well? Rosaline Elbay also starred in the Netflix series Kaleidoscope, and it's amazing from what I hear. I haven't been able to watch the whole thing. I also heard you about to say something.
Yeah, so actually, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but the movie, the Persian version, about an Iranian American family, won Sundance this year and got picked up by Sony. So that's coming to theaters. Yeah, and actually, I think there's another Persian actress in Kaleidoscope. And she's also starring in Persian version, so yay, representation. Yay,
There's more of us and more women.
I just want to add, Paul, though, speaking of the live-action remake of Aladdin, there was some contention in the beginning. They did not want to cast MENA actors in that. They did not want to. And if it wasn't, honestly, for the Muslim Public Affairs Council, the Hollywood Bureau, stepping in and being like, we can help you find these people, and working with Disney on the script, I think that film would have gone a long way. So there are a lot of, I mean, it's, still great representation, but it took a lot of hardworking people who hold the door, as it is, stepping in to make that film what it was.
It's true.
Yeah, because I feel like another one with, I messaged the group about, I wanted to start Moon Knight before this panel. And I think I didn't look at our group text, but I was like, is Oscar Isaac supposed to be Egyptian in it? That was like my main thing. But that's good he's not supposed to be, but it is one of those things where I don't know what the source material, because I love Oscar Isaac, nothing against him. But I kept wanting to just see, like, why couldn't that have been a Middle Eastern character,
Originally he's
Sorry?
Originally it's a Jewish character.
Right. So I think it's a thing in which that could be Middle Eastern, right?
Yeah.
Israeli, and so I think it's one of those things where it's like, it would have been nice, just watching it, even though I know it's going off of source material, but what was really nice was seeing in the credits how many directors and writers were Middle Eastern, and why it does, once you get past that. And of course, Layla is my favorite part, because, she's an Egyptian actress, and she's like kicking ass, like literally, and as an actor as well. So it is that little like extra saucy, being like, oh, this is Madonna, this is, you know, she's doing it.
Layla was played by May Kalamawi, who also starred in Rami along with Rami Youssef. So it's cool to see people intertwining and supporting each other. I love that there are more Egyptian women, or even just Middle Eastern women up and coming, because even, how do I say this? Culturally speaking, it's not often that you get to see women being able to do the things that they want to do. There can, at least for me, in my personal experience, there can be a tendency to want to fulfill certain familial expectations, and it can be a stereotype, but sometimes it's also reality too, and that was a reality for me until I had to say no, like I want to go and choose my own path. So I love that there was that opportunity more and more for female representing people and, you know, people from the region. Yeah.
Hey, you were in the middle of something, Mom. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Paul.
Back to you.
I was going to say, speaking of May Kalamawi and Scarlet Scarab, I saw Scarlet Scarab cosplay earlier today at the Marvel shoot, and I wanted to meet her. If anybody knows who she is, please let me know.
I took a photo with her, so I'll let you know.
Well, but yeah, so basically, you know, as you said, you've been highlighting what's been happening, you know, slowly happening in the industry right now, or at least in film and television and everything. But also just to talk about, you know, some personal experiences. I know for me personally, like I said, something that I've been trying to do is write, you know, more characters who are MENA in my own stories, starring them. Even if the story has something to do with culture, with heritage, I want that representation there. I want to be clear, I mean representation, not tokenism. That should go for all, you know, underrepresented groups. I know for me, some of my own experiences, I had one particular good experience when I was on, when I had a recurring role on this web show, Mr. Student Body President, where they created a character for me and they named him Paul, but they didn't have a last name for him yet. And so I asked the two creators of the show, who were both white guys, I was like, can my character have a Middle Eastern last name? And they said, yes, just give us some names and then we'll see what we can best use. And they actually did settle on a name. So the character that I ended up playing was named Paul Fakuri. And I thought, oh, that was amazing. That was so great to happen. I'm like, okay, great, if that can happen, and I can hopefully make more stuff happen. And so, which leads me to my next question for you guys is, what are some things that you've done to incorporate or honor your own culture, your own heritage into your own work? Or what is something that you would like to do or you would like to see more?
I can jump in first. I kind of mentioned already, I do try to bring in Persian characters. So, because, you know, I mentioned being an actor, so I try to write myself and things. And so I'm like, well, if I make this half Persian trans man, who could you cast? You know, so it has to be me. But I used to be blonde, and it's been interesting. A lot of feedback from people I've gotten is as I've transitioned, I apparently am looking more Middle Eastern, which I think is interesting because, especially with Iran, it's very diverse. You have white, blonde to like black people there. It's a melting pot. So I think that's very interesting. And like, because I used to work in restaurants, so my name would come up a lot, and they'd ask, and I'd always be like, oh, I'm Persian. They're like, you never look Persian. I'm like, oh, it's because I don't look like a terrorist? It's like what you're saying. Even though as a white man, I probably look more like a terrorist now than before. But I was told by acting teachers I can never play Middle Eastern, I can never be Persian. And I just, as a content creator and creating stuff, I was like, I can't make my characters Persian or even mixed, which then eliminates me being able to cast family members who are Persian, right? And I was like, we've been reminded there might be people under the age of 18, so I'm gonna say, well, screw that. Because I should be able to write about my own culture. I grew up mostly with my Persian family. I know mostly Persian culture. Like, I'm actually a bit more disconnected from my white side. And so, yeah, so that's very important to me that I always write people in to be mixed, and that allows for more representation. And one of the things I'm actually excited about is the musical I'm working on, is because specifically you don't see Middle Easterns in musicals. And we love music, we love partying, we love dancing and culture, you know, and like one of the things is I got my parents to watch the new Aladdin movie, and you know, my dad gets a little wary of musicals. My dad loved it because he saw our culture being celebrated in a way that isn't celebrated. And so that's actually one of the things I'm really excited about, is working in some of our Persian music into moments of the musical to have that, because like it's just weird. It's like actually kind of insane to me that we don't have more music-based like genres for our like culture.
If I could jump in and say, as a comedian, I obviously do talk about my Persian heritage, and what I also really like to do is I don't want to use the word hacky, but I mean, I'm not a huge fan of accent jokes or terrorist jokes. Not that they're, comedy is comedy. I'm not, I don't get offended, but it's just, I feel like it's been done so much. So obviously I talk about my culture, and I talk about sometimes stuff that has nothing to do with culture, because like Paul said, unfortunately, sometimes with this diversity movement, we fall into tokenization. And so I do have producers sometimes tell me, well, we already have 2 Persian comics on this show. And it's like, dude, we don't all talk about the same thing. Like, I don't have to talk about my race at all if someone else is doing that. And I think, like as far as Hollywood representation, Paul was saying his character has nothing, wasn't like, it didn't have to do with with being Middle Eastern, but he made the character Middle Eastern. And so I think what eventually we would all like to see is that range. So for example, Jewish American culture, Black American culture, Latino American culture, we have like a show like Transparent, where it's all about their Judaism. They go to Israel, and then you have a show like Broad City, where the episodes don't have to do with their Judaism, but it's still very incorporative. Like they go to a shiva. And then you have Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where I think Andy Samberg's character mentions that he's Jewish once, and then that's the only thing. And I think eventually for every race and every background, we'd love to see that range in Hollywood.
Yeah, just like that opportunity to have those little bits and pieces of our lives just interjected, and that's what makes a character feel real. So I know Esraa and I both have Egyptian backgrounds, but we have very different Egyptian backgrounds. So like Southwest Asia, like Persia, is still very different from North Africa. So even though we're Middle Eastern, MENA, there's still a lot of very individual stories to be told within that. And so like, yeah, I do want to steer away from tokenism, and I think having those opportunities to like just be us would be great, and like not have the pretense of like, oh, I came from a war-torn country, and I'm here now doing the immigrant thing. It's like, well, that is an important story to tell, absolutely, but like we are people too. Like we feel things and we experience stuff, and like anybody else. I would love to see a story of like a Walter White type character, like. I don't know, like my uncle or something, I don't know.
All right.
Yeah.
I think, Paul, you were asking about like an example of something that you got to do in your job or in your career that helped representation, right? I love sneaking on the sets as a background actor. It's one of my favorite things to do, because I only get the casting call for Middle Eastern people, right? It's like either I'm in what's supposed to be 1990s Syria and it's just like some sand on the back lot, or it's like war-torn Afghanistan, and I'm like, I am not looking for this movie at all. But you go, and I'll go up to the ADs and go like, this doesn't make any sense. This does not look right. This is horribly, horribly racist. And this is so offensive. And they'll look at me and they'll be like, really? Like, why? And I'll explain it. And sometimes they'll go over and be like, the background they're telling us this is racist. We have to do something about that. And there's one particular show where that happened, and then I went back and watched it, and all of the wide shots had disappeared. So you could no longer tell what the town kind of looked like. And it had been, like the episode when that flashback plays, it's all very tight. And I was like, okay. So they listened.
What's that studio, the one ranch where they have like that village, is it Blue Sky Ranch?
I think it's, yeah.
Yeah, the one it always plays like some kind of Middle Eastern village, and I've been a background actor before, like cast as like a Middle Eastern villager, whether it's Afghanistan or Iraq, whatever. They just use it's like, okay, we got it. Let's just make it look like whatever, and it all sink.
Same here. I was background on a show that it was supposed to take place in Syria in the 90s, and it was a war-torn zone, and I'm like, the Syrian Civil War didn't start till 2011.
I don't remember.
Probably on the same show.
Did anybody have any questions? Anybody get to write down any questions? Because I see some note cards over there. I see you did. Thank you so much, Mary Marvel. You are Mary Marvel, right?
I'm regular Captain Marvel.
You're regular Captain Marvel.
Regular Shazam.
Awesome, I love it. Ezra, thank you for bringing up that, it was the Muslim Chamber of...
Just Chamber of Commerce.
The Muslim Public Affairs Council.
Yes.
And they operate different, like, over different things, like they work with the White House and stuff, but they created a Hollywood bureau sometime in the last decade to deal with what we're sort of talking about. It's not just like sort of Muslim representation, it really is kind of MENA representation where they're like, they'll step in and say, look, you've written the script, well-intentioned, but here's the reality. Like, we will come in for free and we will help you write it in a way that doesn't hurt people.
Yeah, I also saw that SAG now has a MENA committee as well that people can join to help getting, because, I mean, I think as a lot of us are saying, it takes people from that group to come in and, like, fix it.
Yeah,
basically.
I think that's fantastic. I think that it just like means that there are enough MENA actors in SAG that are like, we're gonna come together and do something about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, real quick, as far as representation goes, did any of you see Disney Channel's Mickey Mouse talk about Nowruz, the Persian New Year? Wasn't that so cute? Yeah, Mickey Mouse does an entire thing. He sets a little half scene, and it's so cute.
That's so cute.
Yeah, well, paper fire, because they're little kids, and he's like, not real fire, because it's dangerous.
Yeah, Nowruz when we're acting and celebrating, while the weather finally realizes also spring.
I was going to say, because of groups like this, thankfully, we got the Egyptian Muhammad Sood to play Aladdin and not Timothy Chalamet, you know? Can you imagine that?
I think that would have really hurt me. Specifically Timothy Chalamet.
I have a crush on him, so that's like the one exception.
We have some questions here.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The question reads, what has been the most impactful MENA or SWANA, which is Southwest Asia, North Africa, representation in media for you, or what are you excited about for the future? I think that's like a two-part question, honestly. Let me know if you need me to read it again.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Okay. What has been the most impactful MENA or SWANA representation in media for you?
Actually, can I answer this one first?
Yeah.
Because I'm actually going to use a recent example, something that actually really impacted me. So I went to go see the musical version of Mean Girls at the Pantages in Los Angeles. I don't know if anybody saw that, but I went to go see it, and there was an Egyptian actress playing Regina George.
Oh, I love it.
And I'm like, oh my God, and she was amazing, because I was reading the program, and I saw her name was Nadina Hassan, and I'm like, oh, I was just so excited. I ended up loving the show, and she was great, and I was just like, I sent her an email thanking her and just being like, I love this, what you've done is amazing, it made my day, it made my night, I loved it so much, and she was like very thankful and everything for that. So that's something that's a recent example, but I'm just like, one thing I haven't been thinking much is, theater and on stage, because I used to do theater, musical theater in high school. I haven't done it in so long, and I've been trying to see more shows. So for me to just see, even if it's just that one person playing that one role, that still meant a whole lot to me. So, yeah.
No, that's huge for musical theater, because, I mean, are there any musicals that take place in anywhere in the Middle East? Because you have, I'm not saying Miss Saigon or any of that, or What's on the Island. That's not the romantic scene.
It's an opera? It's an opera, sorry.
Yeah, it's a bunch of white people on a train that happens to have a racist name.
Again, don't only the Egyptians die on that train?
Yeah, very possible.
No, that's really exciting. I think something I'm excited for, I'll be honest, is I feel like each season of Bridgerton, right? There's like a new underrepresented group. And I was like, are we gonna finally see bougie ass Middle Easterns? Because we're really bougie people. We are so extra. And I'm like, a lot of us. It's very general. But I'm just like, but to see like the Middle Eastern and like North African people not in rags, in a desert.
In a romance would be fantastic.
Yeah, because like that's a big thing too, right? Where it's like they're just there. They're dealing with upper class British people being like, we just need to have love and I can't touch you while we dance, you know, let's see.
Is there anything more Middle Eastern than that?
I mean, literally just the light bulb dance, right?
Oh yeah, how many Middle Eastern people does it take to screw in a light bulb? All of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to say, to add to this, the MENA swanner representation in Moon Knight was amazing to me. Like seeing May, not necessarily, we're not being hit over the head with the idea like, oh, she's Egyptian, here's the fact that she's Egyptian. It's just so natural the way she's like, oh, I'm like getting date molasses juice from the street vendor, and like it's just this very intertwining thing, and that to me made my soul sing. Like you could tell Egypt was just infused into the show, and like they brought as many people in as possible, and it was so helpful and wonderful, and I want more of that.
I'll agree with you. I thought Moon Knight was fantastic for the music and bringing in sort of Egypt. I think one of the directors, if not most of them, are Egyptian. But like I knew the AD team on it, and they were like, "Do you want to come and be background on the show? Be Egyptian background for the show." I was like, "I can't do it because I'm already working." But the fact that you guys are specifically looking for Egyptian people to be the background on the show is awesome. But I thought that show did a really great job.
This may come as a surprise to some people, but as I mentioned, I also work in post-production, specifically reality TV. And for me, actually a really exciting representation moment was Shaws of Sunset. I worked on the last 2 seasons of the show, but even before that, I was a fan. And it got a lot of backlash because people are like, oh, but is that proper representation? Well, to me, actually, yeah, because it's a lot like many other reality shows you see on TV. Yeah, they're partying, they're having fun. But what I loved was the fact that the entire cast was Persian. You know, there was no tokenization in this, and half the cast was Muslim, half was Jewish. They talked about their different histories with their family. They talked about their different political views. It really showed a cool range of the Iranian community in LA. And as I mentioned before, I'm really excited about the Persian version. I do feel like it's kind of going to have its crazy woke crazy rich Asian moment, where it's kind of going to open even more doors for Iranian and Middle Eastern representation.
Okay, so I got a question specifically, and the second part is for the panel. So the first one is my name, and then my father is trans and transitioned in a time where there were a lot of obstacles. What additional obstacles did you face while also being MENA? And then to the panel, what obstacles did you face that were unique in your life to being MENA? I don't know who asked this question, but that's awesome and so wonderful to hear of like trans men, you know, being fathers. You know, just that kind of representation for me as like a younger trans guy is great. The interesting thing, like I would say with being MENA, specifically being Persian, I think this again comes to a thing where like sometimes we have the conversation, I'm like, why are we even all on the same panel, right? Because we're all so different, but colonialism. But in Iran, the government has subsidized gender-affirming surgery since the 80s. And so Persians are gonna have a very different cultural response to trans people than other Middle Easterns. So like, this is like not a big deal to my family with my culture. Even one of my, I won't digress into a story there because I know we only have some time left. But I will say people people not in my family like to weaponize my queerness with my Middle Easternness. Where I'm like, yay, we have like somebody in power who wants to allow me to have access to healthcare. People will be like, well, they bombed the Middle East. How dare you support them? I'm like, name a president that hasn't bombed the Middle East. You know what I mean? Like, it's that kind of thing that is constantly, people take that to take different conflicting parts of my identity to war them against each other. And ultimately, I'm like, you're not an ally for either side most of the time when you're doing that. So that's where I feel like my personal like struggles, it's more being queer in MENA, because I'm sure I'm not the only queer MENA person who has dealt with that, unfortunately. But yeah, and then so the question to the rest of the panel, which I will pass on, is what obstacles do you feel are unique to your life being MENA?
I mean, maybe not unique, but something that I heard on a STEM panel recently of women who work at NASA was the recurring theme of, you know, I had to make my parents mad at me for a while in order to get to where I am, to achieve this dream that I wanted. And I know that I'm not alone in that experience in many ways, but it is something that was very much entrenched in my family culture, and it was so difficult to try and extract myself from that. And being in diaspora and not having that connection anymore has honestly been life-changing in like a catastrophic, but also really fantastic and wonderful way. And so some of it is cultural, and some of it is trying to understand more about like where my family came from too and what happened. And so I feel like that experience of what happened in my motherland, basically, like I'm so separate from it here in the US. I wanted to learn, I wanted to understand what happened and like how my family came to be here, and it was so painful. So there's a lot of ways that I'm not connected to many parts of myself, but I'm getting here and I'm learning, and the more I learn about my culture and the history of it, I go, oh, that makes sense, why my family has this idea of this thing, and like how it interfaces with the rest of the world and the way that I function in society and how I view what I do for a living and how I choose to live my life. Like, it's very different than what they were, you know, even dreamed of. So I'm grateful to be here, but that is one of the major obstacles that I've had to overcome.
Actually, my parents were not supportive of me going into the arts for a very long time. Actually, my dad just got on board with it maybe 2 years ago when he finally saw me perform, and it was just such a great feeling seeing him laugh, even though I was, oh sorry, I can't say that word, but under 18, dang it. No, but I mean, they're more supportive of the post-production, you know, the day job, but as far as stand-up goes, it's always been the question of, okay, but how are you going to support yourself? You know, acting, stand-up, I mean, these jobs are few and far in between. And I mean, I think I can speak for all of us when we say the struggle is still not over. All of us have dry spells where we aren't working and, you know, are just kind of taking random gigs to make ends meet. But when you love what you do, and it sounds so cheesy, it doesn't feel like work, and you just want to keep pursuing it, and especially at a time where MENA representation is so important. And it's what I think really pushes me, at least, to keep going forward.
Honestly, the biggest obstacle I still face is just how illiterate everyone seems. My name is Esraa. And because that is so hard to read and say, a lot of people call me Ezra, which is a Jewish male name, but that really costs me jobs. And it's like, I've worked with ADs before, we've done an entire show together, and they still don't know how to say my name, and they'll overlook me and call for someone else. And at that point, it's like, all right, I'm not getting called back. But it's the hill I chose to die on. I'm like, that is my name. It's the only thing I will take to my grave, and you will not take it from me. And yeah, like similarly to, I think, everyone here, my parents at first were like, well, do you really want to do this? And they fought me on it, especially coming from a Muslim background. My dad was kind of like, anything that takes away from prayer is a sin. And I'm like, okay. But until I showed him like what the DGA pension was, he kind of relaxed. He was like, oh, okay, you'll be fine, okay.
That's funny for me. It was like, you must be famous. And I'm like, that's not how that works.
I've seen this sentiment circulating online before. People say our parents who are immigrants didn't have the privilege to chase their dreams because they were constantly in survival mode. And so, yeah, I mean, we definitely see it as a privilege, but...
Yeah, we should be viewed as our parents' wildest dream, not our parents' nightmares.
Yeah, I mean, I will add that like, in my family now, I think I'm the greatest success. I'm not joking.
Yeah, but thank you for the question and for opening up about your transponder. I appreciate it.
I was going to say, to answer that question as well, when it came to obstacles, I was going to say, like, my family, fortunately, while they were supportive, not they weren't always fully understanding of like how the industry works and everything, and they still continue to be supportive. And for me, sometimes I guess one of the biggest obstacles is that there have been times when I felt disconnected, like from my own culture and my own people, and I've been trying to play catch up, and it's like little things, like trying to relearn Arabic and learn a little bit more about the histories of Iraq and Egypt and Palestine and all that. And for me, sometimes I will admit, sometimes I felt uncultured, and that's why I am trying to catch up and learn more, because I feel like fortunately I haven't met a lot of people of my background in my field, except for these guys.
Yeah, we're far and few between, honestly. It's very rare that I can meet somebody else in my industry who is also from our region.
Yeah, and I think that being disconnected is so interesting, because I actually started taking Farsi classes a few months ago, and as someone who maybe, it's like you don't look Middle Eastern enough, or I don't look queer enough, or you don't look this enough when you're coming into an industry where it's like, well, then you look too much like that, and then you don't look enough like it. It's like, well, what do you want? And because we can't please them, we gotta just do our own thing, or put the pressure, like you're talking about, like, just you being on background, being like, yo, it's racist.
Yeah.
It makes the difference.
So that's the time that we have right now. But before we go, we have a couple minutes left. Guys, is there anything that you want to plug in? Anything you're working on right now? Anything for anybody to check out?
I just want to say, look, if you have an interest in working in film or television and you want to start sort of at the ground level, come and speak to me. I was a set PA for many a year, and I'm finally in like a higher end position. So if you are interested, just come talk to me.
Yes.
Create your own path. If you did want to check out Saffron and Rose or any of my work, my Instagram is @Sarah Fatemi Official. And that's the same across all platforms, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. Also, I'll be at the Comedy Store doing Roast Battle at 10 p.m. in LA, so hit me up, I have a guest list.
That's awesome. I'm working on a really special show, and it's coming out later this fall, so stay tuned. It's from Marvel. That's all I can say. You guys are gonna love it.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely can't follow Marvel. We are actually all very happy they spelled all our names right.
Yeah.
So I'm just Yas Modares Ghasiri on socials, and you can keep up with me there.
And you guys can follow me on Instagram, Hollywood Forever, that's my handle, for whenever I'm doing acting, filmmaking, cosplaying. But that's it for now. And sorry we couldn't get to everybody's questions, but if you guys want to talk to us in the hall after the panel, please come up and do so. Don't be afraid. Thank you so much for coming. Also, thank you to all of our panelists here. Thank you guys so much for being a great audience. Thank you to Sreejith for recording the panel. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your time here at WonderCon.